Today's moderator is Richard Kai, President and CEO, Institute of the Americas.
On behalf of the Institute of the Americas, I want to thank you for being with us for this very important presentation from Andreu García about the lessons of history to understand the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. We know that there was a war in 1846 between Mexico and the U.S. Until today, the relation between Mexico and the U.S. has been very complex. We have topics about immigration and politics. We have 33 million Mexicans living here in the U.S. We have Tijuana, San Diego. It's very complex. We have environmental topics. We have topics related about the transporter industry. And we know that more than anything, this relationship is forever. So we need to find a way to work in a friendly relationship. This year is an election year. Mexico has voted for their next president, Claudia Sheinbaum, and in the U.S., we don't know who will be the next U.S. president. We need to figure out a way to face these challenges together. And the way to do this is to understand the history. I am very grateful to Sergio Viñas and Diana. First of all, to introduce us Andreu García, and to sponsor this event to show all the knowledge that Andreu has about the history and the geopolitical context of our neighbors. Andreu, he is a historian that focuses on methodology and geopolitical relationships. He is based in Barcelona, and he's been working on this for very many years, not only at the European context, but also here in the U.S. So right now, we are very happy to have him here. He just got here from Barcelona, and we're very happy to have him here to share his perspective on the relationships between Mexico and the U.S. Thank you. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Richard. Thanks to the Institute of the Americas, Sergio and Diana, for having this conference possible. Like he said, I am a professor of history, politics, and geopolitical issues. And I have to say that geopolitics is the real history. The real history, it's not on the books because it's written by the winners. And geopolitics, it's the reason why we have history. If I want your wheat, I need your wheat. I cannot just go and get it. I need an excuse where you be the bad guy and I'm the good guy, so I can come and get your wheat. And this is the reason why geopolitics are the reason it creates history. So if you allow me, let me tell you that it just shows us how the past will tell us how the relationship between the U.S. and Mexico will be the relationships currently. If I tell you the Roman Empire has a lot to do this, you will tell me, how that has to do this? And then you're going to tell me, oh, really? How? And then I'm going to tell you we're going to talk about the First World War and the current situation where the U.S. will be an emergent potential Can you understand what I'm saying? And I speak really weird because I am from Mexico. I lived in Mexico, and then I speak a little bit of Catalan and then also Spanish. And if you don't understand me, then I can repeat. I'm looking here for my pointer. This is my website. Baruch da Spinoza said this on the screen. If you don't want to repeat the past, then study it. The history, it's a very important tool. We hear a lot of young people saying, oh, that's a really fat book. Don't you feel, do you really want to read that? Well, what kind of future is awaiting for us if we don't read the past? Let's talk about the fall of the Roman Empire. Remember history when they were telling us what was the year when the Roman Empire fell? Do you think that year 476, January 1st, is when it just fell? Or it was something that it was accumulation of facts? And I'm going to show you that it's very similar to the relationships that are between Mexico and the U.S. It's very similar. Excess of expansion and spending on military spending, corruption, and political instability. The immigration of tribes and economic problems and dependent of the slaves. If that sounds kind of familiar, that was 2,000 years ago. When we talk about the excess of military expenses, there is no internet, no WhatsApp, no nothing. Can you imagine to have an empire that was covering all Europe with millions of soldiers? Think about the communication, the highways that needed to be very efficient in order to manage everything. Imagine the number of troops that needed to keep the border safe. So they needed to invest a lot of money at the military service. What do you think about the walls? Right? If I start talking about metaphysics, if I start teaching metaphysics, you're going to say, what's up with you? But I want to say, I teach also metaphysics, and then the metaphysics, it's something that separates things, the reality. And the wall says, this is it. Until here, you think that Trump decided that it was a good idea? No, that was an idea from Adriano. And then he said, I'm going to have a wall here, and the civilization goes down, and that was it. Bárbaro, barbarians, it's a word for foreigners. So the walls, it's not something that it's new. So when they channel more money for the military, they left behind all the other technologies behind. This is just the basis to understand the present moment. When we talk about political instability and government corruption, there was no ministers or anything. There were emperors. But the problem was the same. What happens if the person that is in power, it's not capable? All that incapability goes down to the rest of the people. Anybody knows who is this person? And I'll give you a tequila shot. Marco Aurelius. It is very important because it was a dream for Plato. He would have dreamed of Marco Aurelius. he was the representative of the Stoicism. If you think about the meditations of Marco Aurelius, Deepak Chopra and all those people from meditations have taken all his meditations until this day. All those people, including Gladiator movie and Richard Crowe, and all those people have taken all his philosophy. Marco Aurelius and the fall of Marco Aurelio, that was the decadence of Rome. The decadence of Rome. And why? Because that was the only time when the best person to be in power. And they will adopt that one. They will adopt that. If they find a person that was the best person, they will adopt that person and will turn them into an emperor. And then Marco Aurelius made a mistake. He didn't adopt a person. He left his empire to his own son, Commodus. And that was the decadence of the Roman Empire. In 75 years, there were 20 emperors. And the army it was like the U.S. Congress. There was a lot of corruptions. They lost trust and the pride to be Roman. And from there, the fall of the Roman Empire. And if you get bored, then I can start singing. Well, we know the barbarians, and then we think about them as really big, thick, and strong people. They were hiding. They were trying to escape. And why were they escaping? Who knows? Remember Attila? They will go to the border, and the Romans not very happily accept them and take them in, and they will mistreat them. And Romans were very racist with the barbarians and gave them really bad jobs until they really need them. So the Roman army lost all their soldiers and start training all those Goths and barbarians and turn them into professional soldiers, and will cause the fall of Romans. And then all of them will get super tired of these fights. They were all immigrants. And then we have here the last cause. They were dependent on the slave work. When this started happening, the base of all democracy is the middle class. The middle class will get in debt, they will get credits, and the distance between the rich people and the poor people will be bigger, and artisans will start surging, and then they will become the dependents on them. And then what happened? If Rome will start losing their borders because they couldn't protect them, if they're not conquest and treasures, they can't finance anything. Why? Because they don't have any money, and there's no walls, there's no nothing, and all the cows and everything start leaving, and everything start getting stolen. Are we good until now? Well, now we have another quote. I hope you know Aldous Huxley. He is a visionary in all ways. This is maybe the biggest lesson in life, is that nobody learned the history lesson. That was a great vision. That was very powerful, because this is something that we need to understand. The the Spanish Empire and British Empire. Philip II and Isabel I. In order to find out what happened, we need to understand what happened between Spain and Great Britain. There were rivalry, murders, and a lot of competence between the two of them. Do you know who is this pretty woman? This is Charles V. Let me stop for a minute. There is a pause when I see one thing. This is Queen Isabel. She had a fame that she was very dirty, that she would not take showers. And it was said that Christopher Columbus will come into the room, and he will go at the end of the room, and because of the smell, because she will say that she will never take a shower until they will reconquest America. And then we have some other stories where that all like the shopping list that she will do for her skincare. So it's not true because she will spend a lot of money on her skincare and her personal hygiene. But I'll tell you later more about that. So the Spanish model, what is the Spanish model? It's the same as the Roman model. As the safe highway, very effective, and everything started when they discovered America. And I say that because in 1492, they said that they found it because it's been proven that the Vikings came to America before the Spaniards. But what can I say? Do you remember the three ships? The Pinta, the Niña, and the Santa Maria. It was the Templarian cross, and they were Why did they do that? Well, that's going to be your homework. With the discovery of America, the Spanish Empire found a resource of richness. So the Pope will give the biggest part to Portugal and will leave Brazil to them. And now they want to have a global empire. They wanted to have a global empire, one emperor for the entire world. And this will be the new British Empire. Who is this person? The Henry VIII. It was a guy that will treat women very well, right? He is the one who divorced his wife to marry Anna Bolena. Yes, so the Anglican Church, it has something to do with that love story. And then the top one is Sir Francis Drake, right? So the British model, it's a trade model. It's a trading model. And the Spanish model has to do with the Catholic Church. And the British model is a trading model. So all the trading partners I see need to trade with Great Britain. what is the difference? What is the difference between a pirate and a corsary? And that was just a certificate. So with that, they will give you a certificate. The queen will sign for it and will give you a way to get Britain a way to get rich. And then they will get this a model of exploitation that was based on trade. Compared to the Spanish model, it was very different. It was very different. There was a lot more tolerant that would allow them to grow. This guy, I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's kind of complicated, but I'm going to tell you that there was a lot of wars between England and Spain because they wanted to dominate the world, because they wanted to dominate the seas. Let me tell you something about Henry VIII. We cannot underestimate the really bad people. First of all, he was not supposed to be king. He became very famous because he was the Maluma of his time. He was the Maluma of his time. He was a composer, and he was very famous, and everybody danced his compositions. He was a great architect, and he was the creator of the army. And he said that the future was in the Navy, the British Navy. And then the Spanish army, we're not going to talk about that a lot, but that was destined to fail. This guy is wearing a wig, and we're not going to talk about that, but the wigs had so many fleas and other insects that if you call them by, they will come by themselves. So there is no one single bathroom in the Versailles castle. If you do you know the Menorca Island? They used to be part of the British Empire. And then after the Paris Treaty, they were back to Spain. So the only colony, it's in Gibraltar. It's a little tiny piece of a mountain in Gibraltar. It's a British colony. That's really fun. At the end, I am going to go at the end of October to visit that. We can't complain. We also have 2 colonies in Africa, Ceuta and another one. So it's really bad to have 2 colonies these days. So now we're going to bring all this to Mexico and the U.S. relationships. So let's do a summary. There's 3 key points: geography and transportation network. Any country that has access to the sea has an advantage. Bolivia and Paraguay don't have access to the ocean. Austria and Hungary do not have access to the ocean. So that's why they become an empire, and that really marks and affects your relationships. And I'm going to explain to you why Greece does not want Turkey to be part of the European Union, and I'm going to tell you why. And we don't know why because we don't know the history. And we need to know the needs, the basic needs. It could be gas, it could be something else. You can call it oil. You're going to give it to me negotiating? Maybe no. Is it clear? So let me create my own story. I can maybe create a war or a boycott or whatever, and that will be my story. That it's those three key issues can create the geopolitics. Have you been to Greece? Well, if you haven't, go, but don't go in July or August because it's super hot. But people think that Greece is a paradise, that it's full of olive trees. 80% of the land on Greece are mountains, and that is in the Peloponnesus Bay. But in the islands, 90% of their land is mountain, so there is no agriculture at all. So the only thing that they can export, it was their culture. All of us here today, it's that we do have a Hellenic culture. The Romans copied the Greek culture. We all, our mental map and our critical thinking comes from the Greek. From the 14th century to the 19th century, there was no Greece. It was only a province of the Ottoman Empire, and they had never forgotten about that. And this is the reason why. Let me clarify something about Turkey. Turkey does not have a space in Europe because it has been banned for it. Because it's almost on the space Schengen. It's not part of the European Union. This is a historic reason. And there is some kind of disagreement between the Greeks and the Turkish people. This is another quote from Montesquieu. Happy people is the history of a nation that can be read in boredom. Who can do that? Maybe Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Monaco. Even though Monaco was created by a pirate, Grimaldi pirate. Are we okay until now? Do you have any questions? First World War. I know you're looking at this war, is the infamy map. But before we talk about this map, is that about 100 years ago? What is 100 years? Nothing. But Europe was in the zenith of their history. They have the Industrial Revolution. They were at the top in every single area. 1/4 of the population was living in Europe. Right now, nobody wants to have children, but back then, there was a boom, and politics were really strong. The politics were made for Europe to Europe, but right before World War I, and right when Europe was the center of the world, it started kind of breaking down with a very powerful U.S. that started pushing hard, and Japan that it's finally coming out of being isolated, and a guy named Marx and another guy named Lenin that changed history forever. So what is this map? This is the map of infamy. This is how a map at the beginning of the 20th century looked like. Look at this. Which country had its own government? Liberia and Ethiopia. everybody else was a colony from somebody. We have colonies of Spain, Italy, France. Look at England. Look at Belgium. I kind of want to ask you to read about this history about Leopold, but Mao, Leo, and Stalin, and Leopold of Belgium. He is one of the biggest assassins in history. Why? Because it was given to him. Why? Because he discovered how he can make tires from a tree. And it was given to him. And why? You guys, people from Mexico, you will be familiar because he is the brother from Carlota or Charlotte, who was married to the Maximilian Empire in Mexico. Okay, who was turned into a crazy person in order to not participate in the politics. And what is it that the reason that it was caused the First World War? What happened with Serbia? It's very simple. With the European system, it was a balance system. It kept the balance. Let me tell you that in Bosnia, let me ask you on something. Do you believe in fate? Like if they say in Mexico, when it's your turn, it's your turn. The reason why the Archduke is going to Serbia is something very simple. His wife was not accepted by his Francisco Jose. And every time there was a family event, they will put his wife in the back. And when he was called to an event in Sarajevo, they said that his wife is going to be sitting with him at the front. But this is not the most important thing. But when he was there in Sarajevo, it was there, and then somebody threw a bomb into his car, and he reacted and grabbed the bomb and threw it back into the public and exploded and killed a lot of people. And they said, we're going to take you somewhere else. And then they said, no. And then he said, no, I need to know what's going on with all these people. I want to know what happened. And then he was able to go into a coffee, and the person who was supposed to kill him was right at the same coffee, and then was sitting next to him and killed him right there. So that was his fate. Why? Serbia was in the ally that was supposed to protect them. Do you know Bismarck? The Iron Chancellor? He said that there will be a war in the Balkans. And he knew that the war will come in the Balkans. So on the First World War is the worst war, even worse than the Second World War, because there were some war techniques that were allowed, like the mustard gas and the other things that were allowed that allow a lot of people to die. Then we have France, Great Britain, and Russia allowed them to, and the Italians betrayed the Triple Ally. and why Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire wanted to do it was to make an ally. We can see how the Austrian-Hungarian Empire had access to the ocean at some point. What was the consequence of the First World War? It's that thing on the screen. That guy on the screen was the cause of the World War I. What happens if I keep hitting a person for a while and humiliate that person for many years? It could be that he could be on the floor, or he can get up and hit me back. How do you lose a war? You can start with negotiations, but because somebody loses or win, this in the First World War, it was very funny because the German army, it was almost complete. And what happened is that the Allies told the Germans, they say, yeah, you're going to end up losing. Yeah, we're going to be keeping up with this for another 2-3 years. And then at the end, you're going to lose the war. But then let's have a treaty. And then Germany accepts with the Versailles Treaty. And this is all the consequences. As a consequence, it was the creation of Hitler. And why? Because all the money had no value. And Germany lost everything, even their name. It was not their name was not even Germany. It was Republic of Weimar. So this is one of the most evil people in the world. And I have to stop for a moment here because the Nazi history is one of my specialty. You can never underestimate these Nazis people. He was fighting the First World War, and nobody believed in him. Why? Because he wanted to be a volunteer, and nobody wanted him. He was painting. Well, welcome again for all those who just arrived here. You just got here to have the movie, but we are just talking about, we talk about the creation of the monsters, and Hitler was not created out of the blue. He was created out of the Versailles Treaty. He was a frustrated painter and frustrated artist. He was underestimated by a lot of people. During the First World War, he got first 2 crosses. But he had his ideas already. There's sometimes that it's good to read some books, even though we're not in agreement. If you read some books that it's about Hitler's books, even though you're not in agreement, you're going to see that he wrote everything, and you can never apply this in life. If you have power, never, never, ever humiliate people. That's the only lesson learned from that. But when we have this, all the empires disappear. The Ottoman Empire disappear, and then Russia becomes the Soviet Union. I hope one day, we can talk about the Tsars and Rasputin. That will be a tragedy. And then, of course, this was a special request by Richard, the Zimmerman telegram. That was in 1917. It was sent a telegram in secret code to the Mexican government, where it's anticipated that the U.S. will not be neutral anymore. And then we said that Mexico, we want you to be on our side. In exchange, we will try to revoke the Guadalupe Treaty and give you back Texas and Arizona, not California. And so what happened? The Mexican government was very smart. And they think that this telegram could be intercepted. And the British said, if we give it to the U.S., they're going to see that we can understand these communications. But if not, what? But Mexico said, you are really far, geopolitically speaking, but the U.S. is right next to me. And this is part of the hidden gems of the history. But what would have happened if Mexico said yes to this? This is the Zimmerman telegram. This is a wonderful jewel of the history. This is another quote of the Greek philosopher Thucydides. History is a very interesting beginning. Now, let's get started with our topic. For all of you that just got here, we're recording the conference, and then you can see it later, the first half of it. This is a map of 1756. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. We have the 13 colonies. You're good. Don't go. So we see the 13 colonies. And then we have this big area here that belongs to France. Louisiana had just bought it by Spain, and it was named Louisiana by on behalf of King Louis. And then we have this other side that nobody has claimed here, that it was Oregon. This is 1756. Right at this time, everything is going to change because the fate of the world is going to change. Why? Because everybody who has dominated the world at that time, they're in decadence. Do you know what it's endogamia? Yeah. Charles II is endogamia, which is to get married to with your relatives, and that's a disaster, genetically speaking. And then we're going to be talking about how the population reaccommodate in different places. And this is a map that shows the area of Texas. The cold reality is this. The New Spain, or Nueva España, was not able to colonize in a very stable way North America. That was a complete failure. And there's millions of Europeans were coming to what is now the U.S. Now, Mexico, nobody was coming to what is Mexico. But then all the Europeans were coming to what is now the U.S. In 1860, 5 million people came to the U.S. In 1829, 704 people came to what is now Mexico. This was a little failure. There was more people coming to the U.S. that started to come all the way down to Texas. This map is very interesting. And then the Monroe America for the Americans. And this is the entire continent. We're not talking about that, just part of it. We are sick of all the immigrants coming from the European immigrants. And these are cartoons from the Monroe Doctrine. There are several books where we can see that humor, it's very important to understand what was going on. In Mexico, there was a guy that it was called Benito Juarez that couldn't pay. That couldn't pay his debt to the Spanish and the British. And he negotiated, but he couldn't do that with the French. And he said, no, we're not going to negotiate, but we're going to I'm interested in your land. And he said, well, no, because the U.S. didn't comply with the Monroe Doctrine. What happened? Look at the dates. What was happening in the U.S. is the Civil War. Napoleon III knew that the U.S. was busy with the Civil War, so he couldn't do anything. It was timing, knowledge. So that's when he takes advantage of this and he starts a war between Mexico and France. So that's where the very famous Cinco de Mayo, right? Because it's the Batalla de Puebla. That it's very, very important, right? Everybody knows about that. There was a war between Mexico and the U.S. Yes, of course. Everybody knows about that. And what was the reason for that? Let's talk about the causes, the story behind that. When there were some people in Texas, this will separate Texas from Coahuila. The U.S. recognizes in 1845 as Texas as part of the U.S., but they say, well, how about a little bit more? Let's take a little bit more on the south part. And then take over of the Rio Nueces River, and they take a Tamaulipas a little bit more, and they built a fort of the Rio Bravo. And the Mexican government says, no, we can't tolerate this, and then we start of the war. And they take over Saltillo, and then Mexico realizes that they're going to lose the war, and they sign the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, where they give Alta California, New Mexico, and Texas. Today we're talking about California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and the southeast of Wyoming. This is part of the Zimmerman. This is why it was important, that telegram, the Zimmerman telegram, because they were going to invalidate this treaty and give back to Mexico all these territories. So at the end, the Monroe Doctrine it was important. But then the U.S. becomes as the world leader, and Great Britain becomes as the biggest trade partner of Mexico. They start operating a lot of companies. There's 80 companies trading with Mexico, especially mining companies, and then the oil. With Porfirio Diaz, that was the last attempt somehow to diversify the country, and it didn't work. There are 4 points to understand the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. in the 20th century. The Bucareli Agreement. In 1923, when Álvaro Obregón government signs all the rights of property to all the foreigners and all the oil companies from the U.S. in 1923. 1938, Lázaro Cárdenas expropriates the oil that was in the hands of 17 foreign companies to give it back to their country. In 1982, there was a crisis. The external debt triplicated. In order to do that, in order to pay, they asked for some loans. And a lot of you know, there was the financial rescue when Ernesto Zedillo is in power and there is no money. And there's the crisis of tequila. There's no money. The peso starts devaluated, and Bill Clinton requests a credit line on behalf of Mexico. So they're going to give this loan to Mexico in order to pay the U.S. Those are the most important key situations that were in the last century to understand the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. From the 1800s until today, we have to understand from the TEMEC to Telecan. And if you allow me, I think that one of the problems here is that there's always something uncomfortable about this. In 200 years, there has not been a trade model that makes believe that Mexico and the U.S. are part of the same economic space, the same region. There is something, there is no trust, and where there is not a business that benefits both of them. Mexico does not feel comfortable with their interdependence of the U.S., and the U.S. does not feel comfortable with Mexico, but the symmetry benefits the U.S., but nobody feels comfortable with each other. We don't understand each other. This is where we are right now. And then right now, this is the conclusion. Do you like this image? This is the AI image. It's very scary, right? This person does not exist, but I generated it with AI. I don't know, but a lot of historians that are experts on both sides have called and said, what would have happened if the U.S. would have found in the U.S. a more organized neighbor, more coherent, more capable, and what would have happened if Mexico would have found a U.S. not so threatening over their territory, which is what happened with all the empires they want to expand. There's no what if the U.S. develop in its entirety. In Mexico, it's also very independent and sovereign. But what can expect for century 21st? More than 10% of the population in the U.S. is of Mexican descent. We're talking about $1 billion of economic exchange every day. So we need to find a way. Are we good now? We're almost at the end. Jean-Paul Sartre said, even the past can be modified. The historians never stop trying to show it. We have the capacity to change the past. The relationship between these two countries, Mexico and the U.S., can be modified and changed. How can we do this? This is very interesting. Look at this graphic. This is from the Department of Commerce and the U.S. The export from Mexico and the U.S. in 2012, $300,000 million, and $346 million, 34% more. And in 2023, $528,000 million. But then what happened? From the U.S. point of view, we have the issue that Mr. López Obrador had thought about, which is the judicial power. We're not going to talk about the overrepresentation in the Congress, whether it's legal or not. But if he has that power of negotiating the constitutional reform, we will not have independence from the judges. What is the base of democracy? The separation of powers. We need to have separation of powers between the executive power, the judicial power. If we can do this, the government can have some influence on the judicial power. What kind of security I have? I have no security if you can change the law any minute. So you can change the law any minute. So they're going to say, well, you voted for this. So that's what it's very, very important of what is going to happen in December. This is very, very, very grave, very difficult. It looks like it's going to happen. So this is Claudia Sheinbaum. She is finally going to be in power. This is very, very good that for the first time in Mexico, there's a woman who's going to be a president, but there's a lot of questions about the independence from López Obrador. He's not letting her do anything. What's going to happen with the international cooperation? The elections in December, they're not only for the U.S., they're also going to affect millions of Mexicans and a lot of people all over the world. The history is great. In history, it's based on perfect timing. What would have happened if Joe Biden would stop running before the assassination attempt to Trump? But he did it after. So things have changed. And we don't know what is going to happen. He did it after. What would happen if Kamala Harris wins elections? Let's just make an exercise. See how she has done this in the past. We can see there will be a more cooperation. She will fight the drug trafficking, immigration, and she will reinforce the TMEC stability. So that will be great, right? This is also something very important. It will strengthen the resources. And if Trump wins, we can also imagine that it will be very, very strong immigration policies. We will see that there's a wall here and a wall there, and this will create some tensions with Mexico. And then we're going to get the wall, and then you guys are going to pay for this. He will want to renegotiate the TMEC. And this will be a double-edged sword. If I want you to vote for me, I'm going to lower the taxes. But then where am I going to get money to do stuff? Money has to come from somewhere, right? people forget about that. So if he gets really strict about immigration, it can affect the economy of the U.S. He's going to get some tariffs, especially in the automotive industry, immigration, drug trafficking, and that can be really hard. Immigration, that's a topic in itself. If we analyze the history of the world, we will know that it's from the beginning of the world. Genghis Khan, you ever heard of him? He had 2 million of horses in Mongolia. There was a drought, and he just decided to take all his horses somewhere else, and, he changed everything, the history of China. There has been a spike here. The situation is here. Let's be pretty cold about this. It happens in Spain as well. The immigrants do the job that nobody else wants to do, right? Let's be very clear. They work the fields, the construction work. What would happen if Donald Trump closes the border and a lot of people that are illegal immigrants get deported? What would happen? Imagine the fields, the manufacturing industry, the construction. That's something that people do not think about that. If nobody can do this, I will need to hire someone. I need to hire somebody that is legal, so I'm going to have to pay them more. The prices will go up, and people don't talk about that. And then sometimes we vote with this, with our liver. We need to vote with this, with our mind. This is one of the options that can happen. How about the war against drugs? This is something that I had to change because this is something very, very strong. The Mayo Zambada was detained, as well as one of the sons of El Chapo Guzman. We have a different vision here. The U.S. and Mexicans is a very movie-like image of the narcos. We think about them as they are legends, that they are very powerful, and how we want to stop them. This is something that has a strategy that's been called kingpin strategy, and you stop them, El Mayo or El Chapo, but then we have another 20 more, because you're not making a solution for anything. It doesn't matter if you stop them. There's 20 more, and they're even worse. What can we do? There's a big problem here. There's a lot of problem that are experts on geopolitics. I don't know if you know about the law of safety. We have AMLO that says, I don't know how they took him, how they took the Mayo Zambada. That is not helping. That is full of contradictions on how is the real cooperation between Mexico and the U.S. In the U.S., they want to know, and Mexico as well. The Article 74 of safety, it says that if a foreign government incites or promotes the Article 74 of the safety law establishes clearly that it's if a foreign government, through their agents, incites or promotes the commission of illegal acts in Mexican territory, should stop the execution of all the agreements and cooperation. And then we need to know to have these agreements that are very honest. Otherwise, it will be really bad. Those are last-minute news. We're almost done. And then I'm going to quote Oscar Wilde. The only duty that we have with history is to rewrite it. Let's change it. The future is in our hands. Let's just not keep it as an anecdote. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. It was a pleasure. We're going to have a Q&A section. You talk about the difference between the British Empire and the Spanish Empire and their difference. Before the conference, we talked about that in the case of the British Empire, it was focused on trade, and the Spanish Empire, it was based on the Roman Empire. And can you talk about how in Mexico it applies with the Roman concept and the narcos, and if we don't understand each other with this philosophy? Well, first of all, the character, there's a big difference in character between the Anglo-Saxons and Latinos. The Anglo-Saxons is very different because they're very cold. I can see the business that I'm going to do with you, and that was it. That's very mercantile. And the Latino people is very feeling. There's two very different ways to interact. We feel the feeling on the other person. The Anglo-Saxon is like, okay, that's fine, but then I want to see how. At the philosophical level that I believe we can work is to have the capacity to immerse each other in their culture. To the people who are who have the power to negotiate is to be immersed in the culture and the other. I can understand that to have the capacity to accept our differences, but I understand that you have the right. I can understand that we don't agree, but I can defend your right to defend. And in Spain, in Mexico, people can be saying very with the feelings first, and then the Anglo-Saxon is like business first. When I have been in the U.S., when somebody comes to visit in Spain, I take them out to have some wine and jamón serrano. Then we understand each other. And when I come over here, then we go see football or baseball, and then I have a great time. We need to generate some emotional links, and some bonding with people. We need to have a comic idea. We need to eliminate all the stereotypes. You don't see more than what you have in your mind as a comic strip. We need to go deeper on that, especially the people who are in power. I have another question for you. I want to talk a little bit about the geopolitics. There was the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. And then the United States became very powerful. And then we have 9/11. And then we had another event that, we all know that it was very important. I want to talk about the influence of 9/11 and the relationship with not only Mexico, but the rest of Latin America. Because, after NAFTA, the United States committed to create with the Las Americas Summit in 1995 to have a free trade region throughout the Americas. And that was almost at the end of Clinton administration. Because, in my opinion, that changed the relationship between the U.S. and Latin America and opened the door to China. That is a very complex question. The worst disease of the human right now is fear, because fear paralyzes you. Because when we feel fear, we are able to do whatever to not feel fear. When 9/11 happened, in order to avoid fear, they centered themselves. And that's normal because of all the risks, that it was a new world of terrorism, and they lost opportunities that could be historic. The arrival of China was predicted way back. Kissinger was the first one to visit. We don't understand why Chinese people are that way. China doesn't love us. The opioid wars, we did a lot of things to them. China was a dormant giant, and they come to us very angry, and they come to separate, and they come to do a lot of damage and throughout the history in the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Russian. We don't know if they are allies or not. So now in Europe, there is a lot of fear. There's some fear in Europe if Trump wins in the U.S., what is it going to happen? Are we just not going to have the OTAN? Or what? We need the U.S. to guarantee the protection of the free world, but we need to know that the U.S. would not be close. And that means a lot of exchanges, good exchanges. But I understand that the U.S. has experienced a lot of things, and it has gone through expansion and contraction. And sometimes we need to do exactly contrary what your brain is telling you. When you are afraid, you contract yourself, but you need to expand. When we talk about China and the geopolitical situation, how do you see the current situation, recognizing that today's situation, we depend on Taiwan because of the electronic chips? 90% of the chips come from Taiwan. Taiwan has a very strategic relationship with us. And it's not a recognized country because there's a policy of one China only. And this is an ambiguity policy. What do you think about that? And sometimes some leaders take advantage of this moment. For those who don't know, Taiwan is China. When there was a civil war between Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek loses the war, it leaves. And the Taiwanese people call themselves China. But Taiwan, it's they call themselves Chinese. They have had some exercises to scare some people, and they're trying to create some strategies to kind of scare other people, but there's always spending. It's a threat, always. And I'm always in a positive perspective with a human being. But there is this very interesting movie with Kevin Costner that it's very appropriate for this. But I think the human being always ends up doing the best thing for that. I don't know what to tell you. I think that they're going to do the best, but we're missing the train with Africa. Africa is the place with all the minerals, the rare minerals for our cell phones. And China is the only one that has looked at Africa. And the Anglo-Saxons and Latinos want this business quick. China is making business with Africa in 20 years. They are working in very long-term businesses. And we don't understand until it's too late. And we are almost arriving late. Because think about China has sank 3 times and has risen 3 times. First of all, I want to introduce Daniel Effont, ex-ambassador, former ambassador, and it's a new member of the board of directors. And his wife, Roxana. We're going to open to Q&A. If anybody wants to ask anything to Andrew. You probably talk about this, but I'm not sure if I understood. If I go back to history, why there were 5 million migrants going to the U.S., but only 700 to Mexico. Why was the difference? The laws were very strict to make businesses. It was an economic. There were a lot of, it was a lot easier to make business, and there were more trading. It was more attractive, the trading packages to do business. And there were some racist laws as well. There is a poster where they have the different colors of the skin, where depending on the color of your skin is how you would be limited economically speaking. The other one that I don't know if has to do with Mexico and the U.S. I would like to know what's happening with Venezuela and what will be the impact with us. What happened in Venezuela, it's a shame. As citizens of the world, we cannot just be observant. However, they're offering things that nobody offered to Maduro, to Cesar Chavez. They're offering that if he leaves power, he's not going to be prosecuted. But he's not accepting. The problem is that throughout history, the world could be softer with the bad people and harder with the good people. Hitler was allowed to annex Austria, and I think that nothing is going to happen. I'm going to say that he's alone. I think he's only solution is to go with Putin or Belarus. We thought he was going to fall 5 years ago, 4 years ago, but he's still there. I don't know what to tell you. History has shown that there's ways to get rid of these people. But if you ask me, I think that he has about 6 months. I hope I'm right. 6 months. I want to talk about this a little bit. I lived in Venezuela for 2 years, right before Chavez. When they offered the opportunity to bring Andrew here and talk about geopolitics, is that something that I learned with my wife in Venezuela is that Venezuelans were very frustrated with the political system. Just like we have seen in Mexico and here in the U.S. In Venezuela that year, more than 21% of people didn't go out to vote, people that were registered to vote. Another 4% of people that voted for Miss Irene Sanz, who was Miss Universe. She was a major of Soao. It was like Del Mar, where all the pretty people there lives. She won 4%. And she was working with Donald Trump because she won Miss Universe. But the thing is that Venezuelans lost their country because they did not realize their democracy was very fragile. And once a guy and once an autocrat is in power, they will never want to leave it. And one of the things that happen is an autocrat in power gives businesses to the military and also has agreements with the narcos. And they have something in common. And my opinion is that it's going to be really hard for Maduro to leave, even though he lost. And he's got the problem that we have in Venezuela is that there's some interests that are against the U.S. that want to stop us and Europe in America, in the American continent. They want to have a port in Venezuela for Russia or for China. That is the reason why I think that it's going to be hard to get rid of Maduro. Because right behind him, he's got his presidential team and his security team. They're Cubans. I hope and I wish the best to Venezuela. I have friends that are Venezuelans because the Venezuelans lost their country. And I read that people sometimes don't know what they're going to lose until it's too late. And that's a lesson for us as well. The elections can change the world. And then I just wanted to, that was a comment about Venezuela. I wanted to ask you something. I am very worried about this situation about all these powers will be divided and the next step will be a dictatorship, and the U.S. is observing this. But then it sounds very childish. Maybe this is something in an agenda. Why are they waiting for something? We're just one step away from a dictatorship. Why are they just observing? The U.S. is observing something and they're not doing anything. Just like Richard was saying, that we don't realize how hard it was to reach democracy. The history of humanity is war. We don't understand that because most people have been born now when we have rights and freedom. What do we have? We have a defect in our brain because we don't appreciate freedom, because a lot of young people don't go out to vote on the day of elections. What do I think about your question? We need to wait for the results, but if it looks like the law is going to be approved, and a lot of things can happen. But at the beginning, the peso is going to be devaluated. I think it looks like it will lose a lot of value. It could be that there will be a lot of money will be taken out of the country. But the question is, the United States is going to allow that their neighbor going to allow Mexico to go in a spiral, to go into and fall into an autocrat? Is the U.S. going to allow to have an autocrat as a neighbor? Remember that Claudia Sheinbaum has invited Putin as their change of power celebration. And then that's a provocation. We are trying to see how you're going to act. As I don't know what you understand of. What's your opinion about Ken Salazar, the U.S. ambassador in Mexico? I believe, I have faith that Claudia Sheinbaum will show a real face once she's in power. Throughout time, a lot of candidates have been holding hands with whoever puts them in power, but once they're in power, they change. But do you remember Plutarco Elias Calles? He left power, but he dominated a lot of powers after many years until Lázaro Cárdenas. But I wonder if Claudia Sheinbaum will cut the umbilical cord with López Obrador. We don't know. We can see the very first phase with the judicial power, and we don't know. And the day of elections, I was in Budapest, Hungary, and I was like crazy how the peso was losing value. I was just refresh, and I kept asking my wife, what do we do? Should we get money out or what? Remember, the panic, it causes crisis. But yes, I'm worried. I think that Claudia Sheinbaum is a very well-educated person. She is an intellectual, and she knows what could be the consequences, but I don't know if I answer your question. We have other questions here. Thank you. My question is very similar to the previous question, but I was just thinking, when Richard was talking about Venezuela, I just thought that he was talking about Mexico when he was talking about Venezuela. But my question is, when it comes to geopolitics, here in the region, we talk about the very special relationship that we have between San Diego and Tijuana. We name it Cali Baja region. We're very much interested in this special relationship. In the case of geopolitics, we like to call it the century of North America. versus the century of China. With your knowledge of international geopolitics, what do you think? Is this the century of North America or century of China? This is black and white, but I think your answer is going to be gray. It could be, and history has shown always two blocks. Sadly, this is how it's always going to be. Two blocks that are antagonic. Just like Richard said, that includes the military topic. We knew that the only thing that was safe in Mexico was the military, but now it's corrupt now. This is a big step to have an autocrat in power. What could happen? This is what could happen. There is such a close relationship between Tijuana and San Diego. Yes, this is the century of North America, but it could also be the century of China as well. But the level of awareness of our leaders is the level of century. I don't want to criticize any politicians, but I don't know. I don't want to say that a lot of politicians. I don't want to criticize politicians, but that one starts with T. And if we talk about these politicians like López Obrador or European politicians or Winston Churchill, remember his grandparents will come with 3 newspapers in the morning and put them on the table. So that was a high intellectual level. We never have made our leaders accountable. If we won a Winston Churchill, I don't know if he won the Nobel Prize of Literature. And he also was a painter. Picasso will tell him, "You're going to leave me without a job." That's why he had depression as well. As citizens, it's our responsibility to make our leaders accountable and demand results. It looks like they sell us a world where everything is black and white. It's either everybody is with me or against me. But when you stop watching the news and you are with your friends, everything is not really that bad. What do I think? The world, more than ever, needs politicians that are humanists, like Marco Aurelius. If not, I see it black. If we see if I see that there is some politicians that are very extremist right now, and then you get an outsider saying that they're going to save everything, but we do not have the level to understand that you're never going to buy dollars at $4 because we never understand that. And that's why it's very important to read, learn, and travel. I think that this is the century of the U.S., but it also could be the century of others. It could be China, because China has been preparing for this for very many years and has done it very well. China is a paradox of the world. China is a communist and is capitalist as well. I hope I answer your question. Hi, I'm Claudia Basurto. 2 questions. The first one, I'm going to go back to your presentation. Can you share 3 reasons as to why immigration was really high, very attractive to the U.S. compared to Mexico, because the U.S. knew how to sell themselves better than Mexico. I could always offer you a better job, but if the other person offers you the same job but sells it to you better, you will go with the other person. The U.S. will give you more facilities for you to come. And the U.S. will say, if you come to work, that's fine. I'll give you on top of that this many acres of land. And in Mexico, they will say, okay, let me see the color of your skin. Are you Catholic? Do you go to church on Sundays? And that was the difference. Remember, the human being will move because they have dreams. So that's why the immigration will never stop, because you can never stop the hope of being better. The second question? Maybe I think it's very interesting, your European perspective. You said that the Mexicans and the U.S. would see each other with distrust, and I think it has to do with economy. It is with economy and culture. Stereotypes are very harmful. So then with Europe, we were a colony of Spain. How do you think we see each other with Mexico and Spain? There's a lot of stereotypes. I think we see each other with the same. It's been funny with the golden visas. A lot of Mexicans came to buy so many properties in Madrid that it's called the new Coral Gables. So that now, if I will tell you how the Mexican history was told in Spain, you will die. You will be so angry. So remember that history is told by the one who won. So the idea that we had about Mexicans, it was really so wrong. So that's what I'm saying, to judge people. Remember this. Everybody has a doctor, right? A family doctor, that it could be a really, really smart person. This is my opinion. Go and have a second opinion. And then when you think that you know everything, that a person that knows nothing thinks that knows everything, is called a syndrome of Dunning-Kruger. And then the problem is that we're dominated by people with the syndrome of Dunning-Kruger. We read everything in Facebook or WhatsApp, and then they think that they know everything with 4 sentences. We need people who really go and study. And I think that we keep the stereotypes because it's easier than reading, understanding, and really learn and understand other people. Jaime Aguilar, thank you for your presentation. I think that with Claudia Sheinbaum, she's a Marxist, more than Mexican, more than Jewish. So she will be a lot more to her school. I think her loyalty to López Obrador, I think she's super loyal to the narcos. So unfortunately, that's what I think. I think that the elections were not won by Morena, but the photo of San Pablo. What do you think about that? Definitely, there was an attempt to assign some people that they wanted. And once she tried, López Obrador immediately will stop her. It is true that she's a Marxist. And unfortunately, it's kind of like a shame to say this on the century 21st. And I'm very optimistic. And then we say that in the judicial power is going to happen? Yes. But maybe the new Secretary of Economy, it's a guy who kind of stabilize the markets. Yeah, but I understand what you said about the Forum of Sao Paulo. And she's got this neighbor that it's very powerful, which is this country. And then the United States is never going to allow that Mexico will become another Venezuela. And it's like, that is never going to allow that. And this could be the opportunity to maybe the U.S. will be, I'm sorry, I cannot hear him without a microphone. And then what will happen? Maybe this is the opportunity that he's waiting to take over Tamaulipas to Monterrey. What will be next? It could be like a weird dream. If you see what happened with the Cuban Missiles crisis, because Nikita Khrushchev and Kennedy could never talk because there was that would happen. That's why the whole thing of the red phone happened, because we need a communication. And I think that a lot of Mexicans will not tolerate that. A lot of Mexicans will not tolerate that. Yeah, it's true that López Obrador has received a lot of support, but it's very easy to manipulate the surveys and the polls. But I am very optimistic. But I believe that I think that the U.S. will say, please stop with an economic sanction. And I think that will stop right there. And I hope. And let's have faith. And if not, let's all move to the U.S. or Spain and have some businesses. Do you believe that the Mayo Zandada was, please just be quiet? Yes, I think there's been, Joe Biden, it's fed up with López Obrador. And what do? There is some policy that what we have to do. The Mexicans, they have been insulting without intention, because we know that Mexico has an ally. How many times López Obrador has gone to Badiraguato? He had even built a new highway. For God's sake, he even went to say hello to the Chapo's mom. Remember, that is the real story and the quote-unquote official version. Dumas said the written story and the real story. And the fun one is the real one. I want to thank you for your presentation, and I want to thank you to Sergio Viñas, first of all, for introducing Andreu. Thank you, Diana. And I want to say briefly about the Institute of the Americas and its history. The Institute of the Americas started in 1981 by the former ambassador of Argentina, Ted Gildren, because he thought it was very important to see a cooperation between the U.S. and Latin America. He thought that the U.S. was not so focused in the countries in the South, but his love for Argentina thought there was a need to have a relationship with all the countries. So today we see this commitment to work with Latin America in 3 areas: in the energy, environment, and climate change, but more than anything in the economic area. And we need to promote the cooperation among all the countries. And with that, I'd like to thank you for being here today, and I hope that you can participate with other programs, whether it's English or Spanish. Thank you so much, and I hope we see you guys soon. Thank you, Richard. Thank you all for being here, being patiently, and with all my distractions. And if you wish, I teach classes via Zoom of history and metaphysics, and I take some trips. We went to Scotland and Ireland, and then we went to our castle, and then we went to some of the descendants of Maria Estuardo. So those are the trips. With the next one will be Portugal and south of Spain, and the next one will be India and Nepal. If you would like to do that, it will be great. It will be a pleasure to have a group of students traveling with me. Thank you all.
This special presentation has been made possible thanks to the generous support of Diana and Sergio Viñas and Crown Investments, Inc.